Greetings, kindred. I am Voivode Maquette, and welcome back to my world of darkness, where today we are going to be doing episode 9 of the Vampire the Masquerade Thicker Than Water recap. This plot line has gone in many strange directions, and I'm very excited to share with you everything that's happened. But due to the fact that I've had several game sessions without being able to do a recap, this is going to have to be a rather condensed version, or it's going to end up being forever long. The game itself, where we typically play about 4 hours a night, we've been playing anywhere between 6 to 7 because of how much people just don't want to stop. It's just been so much fun. Where I'd like to start off is while the kindred of the city were dealing with the issues that happened the last recap, dealing with the fact that the Afterlife Club owned by Damien has been raided by Cert, and that now Damien himself has been set up as the three-faced killer, as the media is calling him. Our dear Tinia has been stuck waiting to discuss matters with Mother Anya of Clan Giovanni. She's very busy with everything that's going on. And when she did finally get to discuss what she was trying to have done, the outcome of that discussion was that if she can get the ingredients to a specific Oblivion ceremony, Mother Anya would be happy to perform the ceremony to help get into the Cert base, find Colin and Mason, and try to get them out. Now, what Mother Anya wanted to do was perform a ceremony to raise a homunculus. So she gave Tinia the instructions to bring back a murder victim who had been killed with a sharp object, the murder weapon itself, and a mixture of urine, fecal matter, and semen. So this is a very interesting position that it puts our young, humane Bruja in. Now, upon leaving, it was also discussed that this would bring the major boon that Mother Anya owes Tinia down a notch. Not that she's paid off full, but at least it's a partial payment of everything that's going on. And that probably is the most likely reason why Mother Anya is so willing to help her out, because the idea is to set up another murder scene with the Hecata symbol on it as usual, and then to sneak that victim who has been treated as the homunculus, at least part of them, to get them inside of the Cert base and to do their work. Fortunately, things do not go as we want, because now we are on tonight, and things just kind of happen. The things that happen are not good. Just to let everybody know, this is going to be a highly condensed, so do not expect any of the grand details, but the kindred eventually all come together to try and get Deacon out of the clutches of Billy Smith. Now, Dawn is interested in getting this over and done with as quickly as possible because she has already had another premonition. She sees the form of Billy Smith looming over Portland, controlling Portland as if it was full of puppets on strings to him. Now, with that in her mind, as they go into the warehouse district that Billy owns, and they confront the Bruja who are there, which is a Bruja by the name of Alicia and a Bruja by the name of Marco, both agents of Billy Smith, Camarilla dedicated Bruja. Our anarchs find themselves in a very interesting position as they break in and they come under direct fire from Marco. This ends up in a massively, beautifully orchestrated scene that I really wish I could give you something more cinematic on this. But in the process, Sam rushes in and ends up killing one of the ghouls as Damien lurks through the shadows and is able to get a hold of Alicia and completely snap her neck the other way around. Not fully killing her, but dropping her on the ground with her staring blankly behind herself with her mouth opening and closing like a trout. And then there's Marco. Marco is somebody who has not really been explained much. It's one of Billy Smith's childer, and he is more of the tech. He's more of the tech agent when it comes to the Brujah within the Camarilla right now. As everything is going on, Tinia finds Marco to be her target, and as she jumps on him, grabs his arm and spins it around facing the wrong way, and he tries to use his presence powers of daunt against her, and she just uses daunt right back. It was an amazing fight that led to Marco confessing on everything of where Deacon Royce was hidden and what Billy Smith's plan for the evening was. Now, with all the gunfire and fighting and the racket going on, in the middle of the fight, as this happens, they hear a roaring voice, an inhuman voice screaming that everything needs to be quiet, just as a horrid form claws its way through the thin metal doors of the loading docks of this warehouse. This all happens just as the fight is ending. Dawn has already rushed upstairs, and she is now dealing with that internal voice telling her, should she or should she not diablerize Deacon Royce while everybody else is distracted. Sam has gone into what Sam does, and he's run upstairs, completely ignored Deacon Royce, and went straight to the computer trying to get as much information off it as possible, as the rest of the crew is just working on with what's left and dealing with this massive beast that ripped through the sheet metal in front of them. But as soon as he sees that the fighting's over, it shrinks back down, and it's just our friend Maquette, who saunters in and asks how everybody is doing, if everything has been well accounted for. This kindred truly does try to become as useful as possible, helpful where needed. And when he realizes that Dawn and Sam are there, kindred that he does know, and Dawn has used a small portion of the blood that Maquette gave to her the night before to wake up Deacon Royce, he realizes that things have gone to plan in a way. And as they're trying to figure out exactly how they should deal with this, they decide staking is the best bet. But wanting to make sure that Marco is truly staked, Maquette shows them that Sam very well could just open the chest cavity and put a wood splinter directly into the heart of Marco. This is where things start going a little different. Deacon Royce is now up. The coterie is all back together, but not for long. They decide to separate. One of the things that has happened this evening is Damien's mercenary group has finally come to help them with this, and they are completely aware of the whole kindred situation due to working with Damien. Now, Damien also, these mercenaries are members of his old platoon. They have personal interest on getting Mason out because Mason also served with them in the military before his embrace. Given the situation that they're in right now, it has been elected that Dawn is going to stay behind with Alicia, Marco, the two staked kindred, and one of the mercenaries. They are going to stay behind as leverage. They now have 2 Brujah under the control of Smith, out of commission. During this whole evening, Sam also was able to gain access to what are known as the Shanghai tunnels underneath Portland, Oregon. There's a mass network of tunnels that used to be used for kidnapping and bootlegging and things like that, but the Brujah now have control over it. In fact, it is known that Billy Smith is using the Shanghai tunnels as leverage to get the Nosferatu's vote for him overthrowing Prince Merrick. Now, this evening is tense due to the fact that it's already getting kind of late, and Deacon Royce was supposed to be at the meeting with Merrick. He was supposed to be backup for the prince to try to handle this entire situation. Billy Smith is now working on staging his coup. He wants to go in there, prove Merrick as a bad prince, and take over with the force of the Primogen Council behind him. And without Deacon Royce there, who intimidates the rest of the Primogen, it could very well happen. The rest of the coterie go underground using the Shanghai tunnels, and they go directly to the Benson Hotel. While this is happening, however, our dear Dawn is left alone with Marco and Alicia and the mercenary, who, after a few minutes, the mercenary walks up to Dawn and offers her a cigarette. She declines, and the mercenary says, "This is how this is going to happen. I'm going to take one of these kindred. I would prefer to take the girl. She seems lighter. Do you have a problem with this?" And as Dawn stood there dumbstruck on the situation that she was in, that this mortal was telling her how things were going to go, she did realize that he was reaching down towards a grenade strapped to his belt. There was a little bit of a conversation there, and he explained to her that he had no intention on wanting to hurt her, but he was going to take this kindred under the orders of his friend Damien. That's when Dawn realized, the hell with it. Why does she care? And as a thank you, the mercenary gave her a high caliber pistol, took Alicia, and left, leaving Dawn alone with Marco, who she saw during the firefight exhibit some very interesting gifts of celerity that she found herself to be desirable. And as soon as the mercenary was out of the way, Dawn did what Dawn does and sank her teeth into the staked Brujah, diablerizing him on the spot. At which point she decided that she was going to go ahead and destroy all evidence. She was able to get into Sam's warehouse, where he has plenty of materials for making drugs. Took the chemicals, spread them around the entire warehouse area, and set it on fire. So, our dear Dawn has now not only committed another diablerie, but she's also committed arson in Billy Smith's area. She, at that point, leaves. The rest of the coterie, however, is just arriving at the Benson Hotel as all of this stuff is going on. And as they get in there, they find themselves in a basement, which is where the old bootleggers used to smuggle in and out alcohol during Prohibition. They get into a service elevator which takes them up and leads them directly into a trap door which leads into a library on the Vampire's Elysium floor, on the 6th floor, where they keep all of their food. This is where they bring humans to sit and wait, drugged, stupefied, sedated. Some of them are just there. All the different varieties that you can think of, all the different resonances that you can think of, just splayed out in this lounge where the kindred will come and bleed them. And this is where the Camarilla gets their elegant wine flutes that just are always full of blood. They keep this room of humans, and they use the Shanghai tunnels to bring them up without detection. When the kindred realize exactly where they are, Deacon Royce leads the way. Now, Damien did not go with them on this point, because Damien already knows that he is in a lot of trouble. I believe he stayed down in the basement through this. Deacon and the rest of the coterie, including Maquette, go in and start looking at all of the kindred who are in the city. The entire city's Camarilla population is there, but there's also some others. Some kindred who are wearing leather jackets, who have blue and purple bands on their arms, who are carrying weapons out in the open, which is a huge Elysium no. Now, Deacon understands that these people are in fact Archons, and he sees at least 2 of them in the room. As he winds down to the banquet area of this room, the others stay out and he steps inside, being led inside by the Archons who are guarding the door. And he comes across an array of kindred he never expected to see. Not only is the entire Camarilla Council of Portland, Oregon there, and we're talking about the entire Primogen Council. We're talking about the higher ups in the security of the city. But we're also seeing Prince Kevin Jackson of Chicago and a small group of his entourage. And sitting at the head of the table next to Billy Smith is Lucindy, Justicar for life of Clan Ventru. He also counts another 3 Archons in the room, one of which is standing next to Prince Merrick, who is stuck, sitting, separated from the rest of the kindred. Now, when they realize that they cannot go in with Deacon, the rest of the kindred make their way back to the elevator and leave and decide to rally back at the Rose Gardens. While they're regrouping, Deacon is stuck in the room with all of these powerful kindred. And while he's there, they let him know that Damien has been used as to offer up as a sacrifice to settle down this situation with Cert. In so doing, the Harpy Anaroma has made it so that Cert was able to find evidence that Damien was in fact the 3-face killer, and that given this entire situation and Damien's involving himself with Anarchs and working with the Hecata, possibly breaking the promise of 1528, that Damien himself will be blood hunted. And given Deacon's grand status and respect within the Camarilla, they would not hold him fully responsible, but they do expect him to participate in the blood hunt that is going to be active. And if he does catch him, that things can be arranged, but he does have right to diablerie due to the fact that he is his sire and may take his blood back if he chooses. At which point, Deacon decides that he's going to tell the Camarilla straight out that he will do anything in his power to protect his child. He has now turned against the Camarilla. You cannot do that. And as the Anarchs begin to close in on him, Deacon realizes that he has now been dragged into living shadow that he himself has not casted. And he finds himself inside of a shadow version of the room where he cannot see any of the kindred. In any and every single reflective surface seems to be a doorway that leads somewhere else in Portland. While the kindred are regrouping, they do decide exactly how things are going to go down. Tinia has gotten the rest of the kindred of the Anarch population rallied together. Miles Trent has brought a group of anarchs along with him to raid the CERT base. Because they know that CERT is patrolling the city, they might have a good chance of being able to get in there and get out as quickly as possible. Redclave himself has shown up with 5 of his anarchs, which we all very well know are nothing but Sabbat. They all hop into trucks and they start driving down to the area, deciding what they're going to do is strategically place explosives around the area and try to blow this place up, relying on James Merrick's idea of using the post-dated maintenance reports in his bureaucracy pool to try to make it look like there was a gas leak inside this area. But this is going to be one massive gas leak if you're talking about blowing up this entire stadium and surrounding buildings. That was not really thought about much, however, because once they came into view of the actual Olympic Stadium, they realized that the entire place was domed by a large cloud of living, pulsating shadow. They decided that they were just going to drive right into it. They knew, at least Sam knew, that this was what they have been waiting for. They themselves have a connection with this shadow that the others don't quite understand, that this is something that has happened before everything went down with the Hecata. This is something that they themselves have been wrapped in since the beginning, since they first came to the city, since they left Sun City, Florida, and came to Portland. As they drive into the shadow and the anarchs scatter, our coterie has all specific jobs to find the server room, to get as much evidence and information as possible, to check out the evidence lockup, to try to get into the barracks and feed if at all possible, because some of our kindred are very hungry after the fight with Marco, and the patrolling CERT has made it very difficult to feed here. Eventually they all find where they're going. Sam gets a hold of the server bits. They end up finding the massacre that is the barracks because Redclave found it first. But they also find an elevator that leads down, an open elevator that leads down deep into the earth itself. And as they reach the bottom, as Damien, Tinia, and Sam reach the bottom, they find the laboratory where they're experimenting on the captives that they have. They find both Colin and Mason alive and well and fed inside glass and steel cages. It takes a little bit of fussing around, but Sam is able to figure out exactly how to get them out. He understands how old relay systems work in electronics and knows that if you take the back panel off a computer, there's typically a schematic that shows you what goes to what, and he's able to set them free. As this is all happening, Deacon steps from the shadows of the room. He had seen his child and the entire situation happening from the shadows. He knows that something is guiding them into this area, and he steps into the room just in time to be able to realize that there's not only those 2 kindred being captive, but there's another. There's a wolf. There's a very large, angry werewolf waiting in a cage as well, also being experimented on. With some careful enunciation and eye contact, Deacon is able to explain to this wolf that can't quite hear what's going on within the cage that he will set him free, with the good faith that it's not going to attack them. Upon understanding what Deacon's trying to tell them, the wolf shifts down into its Hamid form and nods, agreeing that he will not hurt them. As soon as that door opens, however, it shifts back into its Krenos form and bounds its way up the elevator shaft, not even worrying about taking the mechanism. going up and joining in the battle to destroy as many of these humans as possible. Our coterie gathers and they run. They get out. Sam steals a banner from the wall, which has the symbol of this CERT group that is terrorizing the kindred, and they escape. That was so much more detailed, and I really wish I could give you more of a better account, but it was just insane. It was... We record these sessions so that I can keep up and do these things properly, but I have 18 hours of material to siphon through, and I don't think I could do it any justice because this was so incredible. I spoke with Daviga31, Sam, his player, later on, and he said that he was expecting more of more situations involving a puzzle or more of situations involving some type of boss fight. And I told them that due to the actions of the players, due to the actions that they took, they were able to actually bypass the situations that I had planned. The large puzzle that would have taken multiple rolls to figure out and things like that, Sam himself had figured out by knowing that those systems, those older computer systems, will have relay systems and schematics inside of them. And he was able to solve that without dealing with any of the ordeals that I had planned. And that the large boss fight, which could have been accidentally done if they had screwed up that puzzle, would have been that werewolf. I did not expect them to have too much trouble getting past CERT itself. Its defenses were the hard part. And if they had tried to open up the cages without actually putting any thought into how they were going to, there's a good chance they could have set that guru free, causing it to go rampaging through and attack all of the kindred in the room, which could very well have happened if Deacon Royce had not tried to relate to it first, to explain that it was going to get it out there. Now, they're not 100% done dealing with that guru, but for now, they escape. And as they're trying to figure out where exactly they should go, and it's getting closer and closer to the sun rising, Maquette has a suggestion, because he himself had gone, because he had never been involved in anything like this, and this is Maquette's true wish, is to experience as much as possible. They could very well go to the Tzimisce on the mountain. Ivan Vassell, who stays in the Piddick mansion. This made everyone nervous. We have 15 kindred who are traveling at this point. NPCs, trying to figure out exactly where to go. And he says, this guy that nobody knows, this Tzimisce that nobody knows, suggests, let's all go up to this Tzimisce on the mountain. But he's more nervous than anybody else because he knows that Vassell hates Tzimisce who practice vicissitude. He mentions the fact that he believes that Vassell is part of what was known as the lunatic faction at some point in time, that he and his sire had dealings in the past, and that he had never met Vassell himself, but he had heard of him. Maquette instructs Deacon that he's the one who should talk to Vassell, that he is the eldest and therefore would be the one in charge in Vassell's eyes. And he explains to him Tzimisce hospitality, and he tells him that if we go in there and we give them a gift, and we have the idea for a gift on the way out, we may be able to buy 3 nights of protection, giving us a chance to regroup, nourish ourselves, and then escape, if at all possible. So they head there. And when they reach the Piddick mansion and they knock on the door, a servant opens. One of the retainers of Vassell, who is quickly replaced by Vassell's child, Toulouse Vivaldi. Deacon explains the situation and lets them know that they are asking for asylum and that they have things that they could possibly share. But before Tzimisce can give an answer, from the top of the stairs they hear, "Welcome to my house. Enter freely upon your own free will." And I called post. So at this point we have our coterie, -1, up at the Pinnock Mansion, at the mercy of Ivan Vassell, the Tzimisce that everyone has been terrified since I introduced him. Dawn, on the other hand, is on the run. She's traveling the streets of Portland in Offuscate, trying not to get caught by CERT, avoiding the situation that's going on with the explosion of the explosion of the actual CERT base and all that, and also avoiding Camarilla. The next game session was the very next night, and it was the kindred trying to regroup themselves. Ivan Vassell has not been seen at all this night. Tzimisce is there. There are servants there. The kindred themselves are trying to discuss, but there's also one other person missing, and that's Maquette. No one knows where Maquette has gone. Now, while they are trying to regroup, they do talk to Tzimisce, who tells them that his sire will be leaving soon for the evening, because he is going to go have a conversation with the Camarilla, that they have invited him to the Elysium to discuss how things are going, due to the fact that the prince that welcomed him into the city, that allowed him to make his haven at the Pinnock Mansion, has now been dethroned, and Billy Smith has now taken control of the city. No one knows what's going on with Merrick. Unfortunately, no one has seen him since Deacon saw him in the room at the side of that Archon. After Vassell leaves, Maquette reappears. Apparently he had been in the company of the Elder Tzimisce, and he informs the coterie that he did offer the gift that they were to bring, and that is himself. He is offering himself up as a hostage. He explained to Vassell who his sire was, and that this is a good chance for his sire to come back and speak with Vassell, because Maquette's sire was one of Vassell's servants before his embrace. He was a revenant at one point in time who had highly disappointed the elder, and this could very well be the best way of getting the kindred safe, so Maquette offered himself up to this. Dawn, on the other hand, is now trying to make her way to the Pinnock Mansion on foot, which is a lot more difficult than you would imagine. Dawn does make it to the Pinnock Mansion. She just gets there a little bit later. She passes through the cemetery that the two lovers were killed at last month. I believe the second murder of the three-faced killer, the second and third murders, I should say. And as she's walking by the actual murder scene, she sees the crypt that the two lovers were killed on the steps of, and the door is open, and she can see some movement and some light on the inside. When she opens the door, she finds a hooded figure who is up to some pretty interesting things. There's a sheet on the wall that has been completely saturated with blood. It's hung up loosely, tied to some fixtures. There's a dead body on the floor beside the sepulcher, and the creature that she's looking at is digging through one of the tombs, taking things and putting them inside of a bag. When it realizes that it's being watched, because Dawn introduces herself straight out, because she realizes that she's in trouble and she needs help, she explains where she's trying to go, which catches the creature's interest. It introduces itself by the name of Stroma, and it pulls a scalpel off a concrete slab which has been bloodied, with its bony fingers goes over to the sheet and slices it down, opening up a door into the land of the dead itself, into the Shadowlands. It has performed a ritual in this place of death so that it can cross over, and it brings her with him. Travel within the lands of the dead may seem like it takes longer, but traveling through there could actually be a little faster. She is able to get her way through to the Pittock Mansion faster, where she meets up with the others, stepping out of the shadows and surprising them all quite a bit. Sroma speaks to Toulouse and agrees to wait for his sire in his study and disappears for the rest of the night. Apparently these two also have history. In reality, since from storyteller to players or other storytellers, Sroma is a member of the Hecata who was at that supper. He was sitting towards the back, robed, and nobody else wanted to go near him. If you listen to the first, I believe it was the first or second episode of the Sticks and Bones storyline, I do mention him slightly, but I don't give his name. Sroma is a Nagaraja. He was a member of the Black Hand, along with Vivaldi and Vassell. So they know each other from that organization, because the Black Hand was not as large of a group as most people believe that it was. It was a very small, thin-knit cult. No more than a couple of hundred members. So everybody pretty much knew everybody within that group, and he needs to get a hold of his old friend for personal reasons. The rest of the night is spent with them trying to figure out exactly what's going on. Dawn has come back. Everybody's explained the situation, and at which point, since Vassell is not there, Toulouse is there to answer any questions that they have. While this is all happening, Dawn and Sam do reveal the fact that there is a tunnel system underneath this mansion that they know because they have been there before, and they have had a very interesting history with Vassell. Prior to the Sticks and Bones storyline, when Dawn and Sam originally came to Portland from Sun City, Florida, they had eventually made their way up to the Pittock Mansion, where no one was living at the time. They went up there, they met up with Jonathan Harker, my Anarch Tremere, of the Tzimisce, I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, house, to work on a haunting situation, because the Pittock Mansion is haunted. They find a secret passage in the main sitting room, in the fireplace, which leads to a spiral staircase that goes downwards. Now, at this point in time, this is a flashback. When they get in, Harker is instantly incapacitated, knocked out, and the door shuts behind them. The only place for them to go is down. So Sam and Dawn had gone down into the bowels of this cave system where they had found an altar, where upon touching the altar they found that it had been possessed is the wrong word. There is a spirit bound to that altar who claims to be an angel. It's a very handsome man when you can see him, but you have to physically touch the altar first. They were then assaulted by a wraith, where they had fallen over the edge into a chasm in this cave. I understand that this is a lot to take in, but I did not start doing the recap until well after this happened. They met up with a spirit there who seemed to take up the entire cavern on the other side in the Shadowlands 4. Dawn and Sam were effectively dead at this point. And the individual who had attacked them was actually a servant of this creature. This creature, this giant undulating force of shadow and tentacles introduces itself politely as Shalim and explains to Dawn and Sam that anytime anyone passes away, their soul filters through him to move on and create the wheel. The job to destroy wraiths so that the wraiths die, going through Shalim and returning to the natural order of things. This very charismatic shadow creature is able to convince them that if they were to feed him in monthly rituals, that they themselves could gain more power, that they themselves could gain strength, and they would be helping the natural order. It convinces them that he is the god of all kindred, and this Cain story is all ridiculous garbage made up by years of misinformation, and that he truly created kindred as the angels that they are to help humans cross over. So, he eventually does let them come back to life, and they escape. They escape the area to find out that they have been underground for about 6 months, and they came back out and found that the Pittock mansion was now occupied by Tzimisce, which caused a whole thing all over the place, which we don't really truly need to get into, other than the fact that Vassell did not remember. Something had warped his mind on who exactly had been trespassing in his territory. So, Dawn and Sam are acolytes of the god Shalim. This is the source of the abyss, the source of oblivion, of abyssal mysticism and necromancy and things of that nature. So, fun. Now, back in Modern Nights, inside, Deacon has discovered that his powers seem to be much stronger than they ever have been here, that he does seem closer to the abyss than ever before. And as everybody tries to figure out exactly what's going on, eventually Vassell comes home and explains to him the situation, that Billy Smith, this neonate prince, is trying to get Vassell to be on his side, to, if not officially join the Camarilla, then to at least become an ambassador of his kind. And very much like Patricia Black, who has been acting as the keeper of Elysium, that he very well could have a position and a title within the Camarilla, even if he does not fully belong to it, and all he would have to do is turn over the anarchs that are being held. Now, this all sounds fine and good, except for the fact that he has already offered 3 nights of protection to this anarch group, and he explains that to Billy Smith, and he explained it to the anarchs when he came home, that these kindred have at least 3 nights of protection, and if they find a way to get out before then, he cannot help him. So until his promise, his hospitality has run out, he can do nothing to help Billy Smith. End of night 1 at the mansion. Or at least it would be the end of night 1, but it was not, because as all the kindred went to their fine rooms that they have been provided to clean up and try to figure out exactly how to move on, but to sleep for the day, Dawn approaches Ivan Vassell in his study, who is in a long conversation with Slomos. Slomo, who's the Nagaraja, whose name is actually the word humors, as in the liquids of the body, spelt backwards. That's his name. He's in a heated conversation with Vassell as Dawn enters the room. And it seems to be coming to an end where one is speaking in an Indian, in a Hindi dialect, while the other one is speaking in an Eastern European dialect, but they seem to be understanding each other, what they're saying, and they each seem to be trying to get the last word in the conversation. As Soromo exits the room, they're still yelling down the hall back at each other. in almost a very childish manner, each of them being respectful, but wanting to have the final word in the conversation. As Dawn enters, she is gracious, she is polite, and Ivan invites her in to sit down in front of a fire that is not lit. He offers her a drink, and a servant eventually brings her a glass and a decanter of Vitae that has a very interesting resonance to it. A resonance that I actually made up for this scene, where these are not... It's a mix of melancholia and sanguine. And what it actually is the idea of someone who is passionate about learning. The idea is that this is blood from an intellectual. So as the night runs on, as the sun is getting closer to coming up, Dawn spends the next couple of hours in deep conversation with Vizel, admitting to him that she was one of the two kindred who had trespassed, but letting him know that she cannot give the name of the other because that is not her secret to give. He respects this. He also respects the fact that she has been open. And this is where Dawn realizes that information is currency to kindred. This neonate realizes that money is nothing. That anyone with presence or dominate can walk up to any human and get any amount of cash that they actually want. But the actual currency of kindred society is in fact information. And the older you get, the more currency you have, and the less it's worth at that point. For as she's giving minor tidbits to this ancient kindred, she is not only learning how old he is, but exactly what they could do to possibly take over this city, to completely remove the Camarilla presence without even firing a shot. This ancient kindred has been through so much warfare, both physical and political, that he knows exactly how to handle everything. This scene was one of my favorites to run because it was literally myself and Serendipity, who is Dawn's player, sitting on the back porch after game, enjoying a conversation, a one-on-one conversation that probably went on a little too long, but the fact is, this ancient, and Serendipity realized this, that the Dawn realized this, that there's a loneliness that comes with being that old. She even mentions that, but he brushes that off because he has Toulouse. But Toulouse will do whatever it is that Vizel says. There is no freedom there, regardless of whether or not the ancient agrees with that. And speaking to somebody who has free will, who has questions of their own, who isn't just placating his sire, that is something that really grasped onto him. That was worth having. An open conversation with somebody who has their own mind and is still treating him with respect. She learned exactly what to do, and I have to say that the concept that Dawn came up with, because Serendipity and I talked about it later on, is a genius. The idea of picking away at the Camarilla's structure of their resources, making it so that they are incredibly weak, and then at that point displacing them, giving them one last thing that they cannot cover, but that the Camarilla could not cover, but the Anarchs could. It may put the city in a little bit of turmoil, but they're already in turmoil, right? There's already martial law, an explosion. They found out also that other areas, the night of the explosion, the night before when the Olympic Park blew up, other areas also became targets for what the news says, these faulty gas lines that seem to have all been connected. Businesses such as Trent's Scratch and Dent, which is the chop shop mechanics that Miles Trent of the Anarchs owned. There's the Hecata Temple, the church that had been sitting there for over 20 years, completely vacant, had mysteriously also been caught in this. The last drop, the Anarch Bar, was also a victim of this. The Camarilla is systematically taking out all power bases that this group could have to take them out. But if they could talk Vassell into helping out, using his power and his control, they could very well oust the Camarilla and create something completely new. The idea that an ancient vampire would rule from the city, creating a voivode, a landholder, what Ivan Vassell was always in life and always as a vampire. With the city divided up with several barons, very much like an anarch-controlled city, but with a voivode, someone who they could come together and they could work with him as an intermediary and work out their problems and things like that to keep the Camarilla, keep the Sabbat, keep all other enemy factions out. That was genius, and I have never seen that done before in a game. The idea that there is an old world styled voivode, this is my land, stay out of it. My barons will help protect it. I love the idea, and I'm kind of hoping that the city actually gets to that. The kindred at this point, however, have decided by the next night that leaving the city is the best option. Tinia had a way out the night before, but she found out later on that it was only for that night and she lost the ability. However, she was able to get her brother out of the city for safety, just in case any of the Camarilla knew who her touchstone was. With this being accomplished by Asano having a private plane at the Portland International Airport who got him out of there. The next night, however, was spent with the majority of the time them trying to get rocks out of the area to try to clear the way out. Vassell had informed them that using an ancient Tzimisce rite that he had, becoming one with the earth, he was able to meld into the earth and find out that there were 15 guards standing around the perimeter of his territory, making sure the kindred do not get out. However, they had discussed the night before and found a good way to get out would be to travel around the mountain and go to the northeast, to walk along the train lines to get to the airport. But unfortunately, their plane was gone. Using Maquette's knowledge of the train schedule, they might be able to hop a boxcar and get to LA or possibly Washington, D.C. But the idea of leaving the city is becoming less and less of an option. Not because of lack of escape, but because they don't want to give Smith the satisfaction of owning this territory. The rest of the Anarchs have all discussed, and Fulton is the best place to get in on this. All of the Camarilla have been pushed out of that area, and Redclave has an iron grip. It's also a sack of shit area. I don't know about in real life, but in our game, it has become the Barrens. It has become the no man's land. This is where burned out gas stations and abandoned buildings are. I've seen pictures of Fulton. I know it's not actually like this, but I needed to give my dirty Anarchs somewhere to go. And this being more like what you would consider something that the Sabbat might be in control of seemed right to me. So no disrespect on anybody from Fulton in Portland, Oregon. I'm sure your place is beautiful. But it seems to be getting very, very confusing on how they are going to handle this. Dawn tried to explain the situation on how they were going to handle what her idea to handle the situation with Vassell was, but no one really seems to be listening. At which point, Vassell also made it quite clear that it would most likely be a good idea to send an envoy to Billy Smith and give them back Mason, who is still technically a member of the Camarilla. Then there's a spy on the inside. Plans were made. Mason stayed out of it because he didn't want to know too much. He didn't want to have them be able to get anything out of him. So Vivaldi then drives them to the Elysium, being stopped just as they're leaving the territory by one of the men who's assigned to watch the area. Vivaldi rolls down the car window, looks at him and says, "We are on our way to Elysium, therefore by your rules, we are safe." and they're allowed to pass. The car goes directly to the Elysium. They go inside, and all hell breaks loose at that point because there was at least a minor plan. They were going to go in there and try to be as diplomatic as possible. They gave Mason back. That worked. But at which point, they started talking. And what could have been a very amicable way of handling things did not quite go so well, because they each had their own way of how they wanted to handle things. Dawn was trying to find a way to get a hold of Crescenza Grimaldi, who is a revenant working directly with Merrick. Tinia wanted to be able to handle things on a more we're not trying to start a war way about things, and Sam wanted to be more in your face about it. So there ended up being some arguing between the coterie inside of the Elysium. Damien did not go to this because he was outright blood hunted and the laws of Elysium do not apply to him. Deacon Royce also did not go because now that he has denied the Camarilla and their orders and ran away, he is also under the subject of a blood hunt. Now, when they enter the Elysium, things have been moved around a little bit. Smith has a throne area, not too overt, but he has an area in the center of the Elysium where people can come to see him, as does Anton Dracon and his wife Rose. Now, with all that going on, behind these thrones was also James Merrick, staked and strung up, with a rope around his neck and tied to a rafter, swaying gently as the kindred interacted around him. This man has lost all respect, at least so it seems. While things are happening and tempers are flaring within the Elysium, however, Dawn does find a way to break off and goes and talks to Crescenza Grimaldi, who is standing along with Alexander Thorne, the Ventru child of James Merrick and also member of the cult of Mithras, who introduces her to another individual who's standing next to him, a young woman by the name of Yolanda Porter, who is also a member of the cult of Mithras, and he introduces her as his sister and explains that this is one of Merrick's other children. How many children does this Ventru have? 3 at this count, so not that many. But as things are going on, Dawn realizes that she's heard the name Porter. They're looking for a Malkavian in the Anarchs by the name of Billy Porter. And when Dawn mentions this, she says, "Yes, I'm his mother." At which point it starts getting Dawn's mind going around, but she also does see the primogen of the area, and there's a William Porter, who is the primogen of Clan Malkavian. So this is a little bit of a jumble. Tinia is listening to all this happening too, and she's just trying to grasp the idea of how this relationship is working. Is Billy William Porter's child or his actual son? Are they related in some fashion? Is he keeping him captive? Because William Porter is known to keep Billy locked up in the mental ward at his hospital. Where does Yolanda fit in all this? Is she the birth mother of one of them or both of them? And how exactly does this whole thing work? It's a very confusing subject, but that jumble is just a jumble for you as it is a jumble for the players. As they are going on, there was another suggestion before they came to the Elysium, and that was given by Ivan Vassell, and that is to get an organization known as the Romanian Legacy Foundation involved. And he explains to them that what the Romanian Legacy Foundation is, it works very much like one of those many websites that try to find out your ancestry, like Ancestry.com and things like that. But what this does, it looks for people who directly have Romanian heritage and who could very well be related to specific families. The Romanian Legacy Foundation is a group that is founded by different heads of revenant families. And the idea that getting the Romanian Legacy Foundation to sponsor an event in the Benson Hotel, which is a standard hotel, would very well scare the shit out of Anton Dracon. And the reason I say that is because the name Anton Dracon, Anthony Michael Dracon, amused Vassell so much because he realized that Anthony Michael Dracon was named after the Trinity of Constantinople, the three vampires who wanted to create a vampiric utopia. Dracon, the Tzimisce; Michael, the Toreador, Angel; and Anthony, the Ventru, where their dream collapsed. But this sprang the need for Colin Griffin to finally relieve his big secret that he had been keeping for nearly 200 years now, because Colin was a member of the Boys Club, which was the old coterie that consisted of Merrick, Munroth, Griffin himself, and Anton. These were a group of vampires bound together by a single secret. An inn was opened, known as the Atrium Inn. The Atrium Inn was run by a woman named Lady Zan, and Lady Zan in real life was Elena Zantosa, who was a member of the Zantosa Revenant family. Her accountant was a young man named Kenneth O'Burtis. And Kenneth O'Burtis had auctioned off his abilities to the rest of the city, becoming the accountant for pretty much everyone in the entire city. But he hated his position. Kenneth O'Burtis was set up specifically to be a breeder, which is not something that he wanted himself to be. Kenneth O'Burtis wanted to have a better life for himself. He wanted to be kindred. He didn't want to be stuck as a revenant his entire life, just to be bred to death, to create more revenants who are going to be bred to death. So he ended up faking his own death. And Anton Dracon was born. Pulling some strings with the current prince's child, Merrick, at the time, they were able to slip Anton into society, who became a strong leading member of the city's council over time. Kenneth O'Burtis dies. Anton Dracon lives. That was the big secret. That's what the Boys Club was founded on. And due to the fact that Merrick A. embraced without permission and embraced a Sabbat Revenant, nonetheless, this could cause everything to tumble down for Anton, who, in reality, holds a lot more power in the city than Billy Smith. So getting revenants in the area could very well scare Anton enough to shake some of his control loose. Now, at that point in time, they had also decided that Deacon's church also needs a good place to go that's safe, because it's an old building and it could very well be subject to damage the same way that the Olympic Park did. So getting his church in the Benson Hotel was also something that is highly considered. Now, while they're in there, Dawn is speaking with Alexander Thorne and Yolanda, with the Grimaldi standing in the background just listening to what's going on, because he knows more. He knows more about things that are happening than most people in the city. He's been rummaging through everybody's information. So when Dawn says, "Have you ever heard of the Romanian Legacy Foundation?" to Alexander Thorne, Grimaldi excuses himself and is gone at that point on. They finish up their schmoozing and upsetting people, and the Camarilla trying very hard to just follow the rules, because when you're going to an Elysium, you're untouchable, because you're going to the Elysium. When you're at the Elysium, you're untouchable because you're at the Elysium. They can't hurt you when you're going home from the Elysium either. So therefore, this small coterie is safe at the moment. So they end up going. When they get in the elevator, Grimaldi pops out of Obfuscate and starts questioning them exactly what's going on. They let him know the plan. They let him know the plan, and he agrees that this could very well be a very good way of doing things. In fact, he knows personally that the old Tzimisce who ran the Atrium Inn, which the old Ecstasy Saloon was attached to, is still alive. He could very well have been taken by the beckoning by now, but he does know for sure that his servant is still alive, and in Seattle, at the Atrium Hotel, Elena Zantoza still lives and still runs things, and getting her directly into the city could very well dethrone everything, could completely throw everything that Anton has planned off, especially if she was to be let in on the fact that Kenneth Obertus was in fact Anton Dracon. At which point they get to the car and they head home and they realize they're being followed. There's so much fighting happening, so much arguing, so much ridiculousness between Tinia and Sam that Dawn just can't handle this anymore, and she's starting to realize that she needs to make things better. She needs to get them to stop fighting. They get the car to pull over because they're being followed. About a block away from the road that leads to the Pittock Mansion, they pull over. Toulouse hoping that they know what the hell they're doing. And as they're continuing the fight, they notice that it's Rhino. It's Billy Smith's other child has gotten out of the car, and he's lit up a cigarette, leaning on a baseball bat outside. Now, Dawn decides that she is going to try to sneak up on him in Obfuscate, steal the bat, and attack him. She wants to instigate a fight so that Tinia and Sam have to work together to get out of it. Billy's a little bit too fast for that, and he's got a little bit too much of a grip on that bat. And as she goes to grab it, in a blink of an eye, he has the bat, and it's already hit her on the back of the head, and she's face down on the ground. Rhino pulls out a small chalkboard and a piece of chalk and starts writing on it. He can't speak. His throat has been slit. And he faces it at her and says, "What the hell are you doing? Are you serious?" Sam gets out to talk, or Sam gets out to fight next. And Smith writes down on the board and points it at her, "You want to take this and go home?" He realizes that he's not trying to antagonize. Smith is literally making sure that they are following within the guidelines of Elysium. That if they decide to stray, they're open season. But he wants to make sure they're heading home. Tinia and Sam drag Dawn back to the car, get back in, and start driving on. Rhino just leans against the car, smoking a cigarette and watching. As they approach the boundary line of Ivan Vasel's territory, however, there's a pile in the road. As they get closer, they realize that it's bodies, 15 to be exact. They get out to investigate, and it's the guards who were watching the perimeter. One of them had a note stuffed into its mouth. They take it and they read it, and it says, "Now we're even. I owe you nothing." Simple. That's all it says. They realize, Tinia and Sam realize pretty darn quickly that this is the werewolf letting them know that he's paid back his debt for them saving his life. Toulouse decides that they should probably get back, and they drive. Upon reaching the area, Toulouse grabs a couple of servants, heads back down to clean up the mess. 15 bodies is not something that needs to be sitting at the foothills of the mountain when the sun comes up. Someone will notice this. At this point, they're trying to figure out exactly what to do. Dawn and Sam slip away because it's the night of the full moon, and it's time to do their ritual for Shalim. And as they're down at the altar performing the ritual, where they were told to first begin performing these rituals, Deacon realizes that there's something happening. He realizes that every shadow in the Piddock is a window or a door to somewhere else. He looks down, he can see through the floors, down deep into the cavern. You can see them performing this rite. Deacon has also been practicing the rites of Shalim, but he's not that far in practicing. He knows things. He actually knows a little bit of abyssal mysticism. In fact, he can contact other members. He rushes downstairs as Tzimisce rushes upstairs to effectively tattle on what those two are doing. She has a very humorous back and forth with Harker, who kind of knows what's going on because he was kind of here, kind of wasn't during that whole situation. But when Deacon gets down there, he starts participating in this ritual, contacting other members, using sacred words only those who know the rites of Shalim can do. Shadows open up, and other members of the cult of Shalim step through, surround the altar, and begin the chanting. Now, 13 in all, the number of full moons in a year. These worshippers of Shalim call forth and manifest Shalim on this side, allowing Deacon to speak directly to his dark god. He explains to him that his acolytes are in trouble, that they need an escape, and he's begging him for assistance. He is able to convince Shalim that this is a needed thing, and Shalim gifts him with what appears to be a full-size oval mirror of black obsidian that is laying on the altar. And the shadows are gone. The only ones that are left are Sam, Dawn, and Deacon. They take this mirror upstairs, and they explain that they can get them anywhere. A young Nosferatu member offers to be escorted through the mirror to California to see if he can get help, get backup from the other anarchs there. Because that's one of the ideas that was floating around, is getting to California and getting backup. Deacon takes them through. They arrive on the other side in California through another mirror, deep in the bowels of a labyrinth under the city, where they come face to face with the Nosferatu, who looks at them and asks why it is always my home. What are you doing in my house? That Nosferatu offers to take our Nosferatu to meet with the baronies of LA to try to find if they can offer some help in this situation. Deacon goes back. They decide that they're going to go to Fulton at that point in time, that he can get them to Fulton. Now, while the coterie was at the Elysium dealing with Billy Smith and all that, Deacon had stayed behind. He sat in a room and he wrote down everything. He wrote down a thesis on how Oblivion works. Everything that he needed to know. And as a parting gift to Vassell, before he took the others to Fulton, he gifted it to the Elder Tzimisce, who was none too happy to receive such a amazingly well-worded gift. The kindred then left, except for Dawn, who decided to stay because she had to have another conversation with Vassell before leaving. And that is where we end. That is where we are. And tonight, on September 17th, 2021, I will continue this story with my coterie, with my players. Thank you for joining me, and I hope this wasn't too hectic. I know that it was, because I was trying to pull everything out of memory because I have way too much material to listen to. We'll be back with more of My World of Darkness as soon as possible. Good evening.